the 7 seals. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. The white horse represents an unparalleled time of world peace, but this is a peace through false messiahs, culminating in the Antichrist. The whole world will follow this rider on the horse, intent on finding this false peace. The bow is a symbol of war, but the absence of arrows likely means the peace was won by covenants and not by war. When the Lamb opened the 2nd seal, I heard a 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. Now the holocaust of war and violence descends on planet Earth. It is the beginning of birth pangs described by Christ when he taught here on Earth. It is a time when violent slaughter will become common. There will be revolts, massacres, assassinations, and widespread bloodshed. When the Lamb opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hands. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying,
"A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine."
Worldwide war will disrupt food supplies and bring about an epidemic of global famine and hunger. The scales indicate that the scarcity of food will lead to rationing and food lines. The amounts indicate that people will work all day just for enough food to eat that day. Barley, normally given to animals, will be eaten by people. Products such as oil and wine used in cooking will be regarded as luxuries. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and before me was a pale horse. The horseman on it was named Death, and Hades was following after him. Authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth, to kill by the sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild animals of the earth. As a result of the war and famine, more disease and pestilence breaks out around the world. Even today, diseases once thought eradicated are springing back to life throughout the world. The devastation brought in the aftermath of war, hunger, and disease now claims 25% of the population. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. Fear not, the Lion of Judah has overcome, and he will be with him today. Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out. Allah Akbar, only God is great. No Christians will be allowed to live in this city.
How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? You must wait a little longer until the number of your fellow brothers who are to be killed is completed.
The fifth seal describes the strength and force of the prayers of the saints as they ask for God's vengeance. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. Great segments of the earth's plates began to slip, causing immense devastation. Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? The sun turned black as sackcloth made of goat's hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars fell to earth as late figs dropped from a tree when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll, rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. All on earth, kings, princes, generals, the rich, the mighty, and every slave and every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. The faults of the earth begin to fracture simultaneously, causing the earth to have an earthquake like never before experienced. This is likely because of large amounts of ash and debris blown into the earth's atmosphere from volcanic explosions accompanying the earthquakes. This was also prophesied in the Old Testament in the book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 31. This is likely a massive meteor or asteroid shower that strikes the earth. The inhabitants of the earth will begin to realize the source behind these events. The sixth seal begins the time the prophets called the Day of the Lord. The first 5 seals are the results of human activity, but now God begins direct intervention. Then I saw 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth. They were holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God.
Do not do any harm to the land or the sea or the trees until we have put the seal of God on the foreheads of his servants.
From each of the 12 tribes, God sealed and selected 12,000 who would serve him during this time. These are the first of the Jews who are redeemed as Israel finally begins to be the witness nation God had called it to be in the Old Testament. These 144,000 Jewish evangelists become a great missionary corps whom God protects as he uses them to share the gospel across the world to both Jews and Gentiles. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that could not be counted. They were from every nation, tribe, people, and language from the earth. They were now standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Though this time will be a time of unprecedented judgment, it will also be a time of unprecedented redemption, with many coming to faith during the tribulation time period. Amen.
praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be to our God forever and ever.
Who are these, clothed in white robes, and from where have they come?
Sir, you know.
These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they serve him day and night. He who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, nor thirst, nor be struck by the sun or scorching heat. During the 7-year tribulation period, many will be saved, martyred, and enter into heaven. Their robes are white. Christ has cleansed them from their sin, and God will wipe away the tears from their eyes. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. I saw 7 angels who stand before God, and they were given 7 trumpets. An angel was given much incense to offer with the prayers of God's people that went up before God. After this, the angel took fire from the altar and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumbling flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. This silence is due to the awe and anticipation that comes from the terrible reality of the judgments that God is about to unleash on the earth. For 2,000 years, Christians have been praying for God's kingdom to come. God's tribulation judgments are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls of wrath. These are the parts of his plan to accomplish 5 major things. 1. To preach the gospel to the nations. 2. To bring Israel as a whole to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. 3. To evict Satan and his followers from the earth. 4. To take possession of the earth. And 5, to set up his kingdom upon the earth. Now, I want everyone to understand that the rider at this point is not Jesus Christ on the white horse. It's the Antichrist. The catastrophic events of the seals is what triggers a polar axis shift. If you don't know what that means, this causes the earth to tilt more than 23.5 degrees. This will literally turn the world upside down. This is what makes the skies seem to roll like a scroll.
So I want you to picture what's happening, what John is seeing in this revelation. A huge earthquake occurs, an earthquake that's never been seen like this on the earth. It causes the tectonic plates to move, which triggers more earthquakes along all the faults, which causes volcanoes to erupt, which will cause the sun to become dark and the moon to turn red. But that's not enough. Then you have these huge meteorites falling on the earth, wiping out cities and causing catastrophic damage and destruction to the earth. But people, that's not the worst of it. Now, if that's all the 6th seal was, you would say, man, what more do you need? But that's not the worst of it. This catastrophic event is going to cause a polar axis shift. Now, does everyone know what a polar axis shift is? I'm going to assume that there's some people here that don't know what a polar axis shift is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and explain it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a science lesson if you don't mind. The earth is like a gyroscope spinning on an axis. The axis that it's spinning on is called the polar axis because it's in line with the north and the south pole. In other words, think of it as an axis. Think of the axis as an imaginary line that extends all the way through the earth and comes out the North Pole and the South Pole. And that's what the earth is spinning on. So we've got our globe here. Now, we all know that the earth spins, right? It's spinning on this axis. This is the axis. You have one here at the South Pole and one here at the North Pole. Now, pretend that that line would go all the way through, and that's the axis that the Earth is spinning on. Now, what's interesting, and I'm going to mention this quite frequently because it's pretty important. This axis, this polar axis, because it goes to the North and South Pole, this North Pole axis is actually pointing directly toward Polaris, the North Star. And the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees. Now, because the Earth is tilted 23 degrees on its axis as it rotates around the sun, we have different seasons throughout the year. As the Earth revolves around the sun, the northern and the southern hemispheres either move further or closer away, or further away from the sun or closer to the sun. And let me just kind of illustrate this, if you don't mind, with this globe. All right? This is tilted. Let's say this is the sun right here. My pulpit is the sun. Right here is North America. Can you see that? Can everyone see North America? Okay, because we're tilted at 23.5 degrees, when this begins to rotate across it, at this point I want you to notice that North America is close to the sun. Now, as we start to go, the Earth does not do this. Why does it not do that? This. Because that would mean that the axis is rotating, and it doesn't do that. I told you that the polar axis points directly towards the North Star, right? It's always pointing towards the North Star. So it doesn't do this. It actually continues to stay just like this as it revolves around the sun. Now, when it gets on this side, it's further away from the sun. What does that tell us? It's wintertime. That's right. Over here, it's closer to the sun. That means it's summertime. But as it begins to come and gets around here, it's a little further away, we start experiencing autumn or fall. Then we get over here, and we're the furthest away from the sun, so now we're experiencing winter. And as we start to go back around, as we're revolving around, we hit springtime, and then we come all the way to summer. So that's how we get the seasons. Does that make sense? Now, the polar axis of the Earth, as I've already told you, is pointed towards the North Star. And it continues to point towards the North Star as it revolves around the sun. If it didn't do that, we wouldn't have different seasons, but that's what it does. And that's why we can study the stars. They're always fixed in this place. We know exactly where they're going to be. Now, how many of you remember the tsunami that hit Sri Lanka on December 26, 2004? Do you remember that? It was caused by a massive earthquake that measured a 9, as I just got through telling you, on the Richter scale. It killed 170,000 people in Sumatra, 31,000 in Sri Lanka. What's interesting is that the earthquake that triggered this tsunami was said to have caused the earth to wobble. Not enough to feel, but enough to measure. Now, when I say wobble, what I'm talking about is the polar axis moving from its tilt of 23.5 degrees. And that's what a polar axis shift is. It's always at 23.5 degrees. But when that hit, that tsunami, that earthquake that caused the tsunami, it caused this to wobble a little bit. Not enough for you to feel, but in other words, that 23.5 degrees was just kind of going back and forth. And that's what a polar axis shift is. It's when the polar axis shifts. And the Earth is either tilted more than 23.5 degrees or less than 23.5 degrees. Now, can you imagine what that would do if the polar axis shifted dramatically? It would create such a climate change that would cause catastrophic events. It would figuratively, not literally, figuratively turn the world upside down. We'll look at that in just a minute. Now, how do I know that a polar axis shift is going to occur when this great earthquake hits? Aren't you trying to sensationalize this out? You're teaching the book of Revelation. You've been going verse by verse, and you wrote this chart up here, and you came to the sixth seal, and you said there's going to be a polar axis shift. Are you just trying to sensationalize it? Are you going to be an evangelist and embellish it and make it worse than it sounds so you can get more people saved? No. So how do I know that a polar axis shift is going to occur when this sixth seal is open and this great earthquake occurs? Well, verse 14 tells me. Turn to verse number 14. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. Now here's what's kind of sad. This is a horrible translation. Because it's a horrible translation, most of you don't understand what it's saying. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, look at that. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it's rolled away. The heavens departed as a scroll when it's rolled away. What does that mean? The heavens aren't going to be there anymore? There's nothing out there? No. This is a horrible translation, as I said. So what I want to do is I want to show you how it should have been translated. So let's just kind of tear this apart, all right? First of all, the word departed is translated from the Greek word apokorizo, and it means to split or to part. So what John's saying is that the heaven was split like a scroll. So I want you to picture heaven as a split scroll. Now, this is a split scroll. Do you know why it's called a split scroll? Because it's split right down the middle. Now, if it was like this, that's a scroll. All right? But it says that heaven is like a split scroll. This is a split scroll because it is split in two. Does that make sense? And in John's day, this was referred to as a split scroll. Now, I want you to underline the phrase, rolled together. That phrase is translated from the Greek word halisso. Halisso simply means to roll. The picture that John is painting is of a split scroll being rolled. Not rolled up, not rolled out, not rolled together, but simply being rolled. Something that John would have seen every day of his life. What does it mean it's being rolled? What it means is that when it's opened, when you roll a split scroll, as you roll the right side out, you roll the left side in to read. When you say, I didn't quite get that, I wasn't paying attention. Hey, you had that TV up too loud. Could you turn that down? I'm going to have to read this again. So I would roll the left side out as I roll the left side in. That's how you roll a split scroll. Does that make sense? All right. Now, let's illustrate what John is saying here. He said that heaven, the sky, was parted like a scroll and rolled. Now, typically, whenever a scroll was rolled, you rolled, as I said, one side out, one side in. Can you see me doing that? It's kind of hard not having a table to do that. That's going out while that's going in. That's how you rolled a scroll. So, that means that the stars were visible wherever you lived are no longer visible. Or you have to look somewhere for them. Because what he's saying is the sky was like this split scroll. And it rolled. In other words, this side went out as this side went in, which meant that the things that I saw on the scroll, the things that I was able to see, I can no longer see. And the things that were hidden from me, I can now see. That's the purpose of rolling a scroll. Wow. So if a word was in the middle of this scroll, it moves to the left as I roll the scroll. Everything shifts as the scroll is rolled. Does that make sense? If I'm sitting here reading it and I see a word that's right here and I want to roll this scroll, as I roll it, right now it's in the middle, but as I roll it, now it's on the left side. That's what he's telling us happened. Now, when he begins to describe the sky like this, and he says it was like a split scroll, and the scroll was rolled. What he's saying is that the stars that were visible before, wherever you lived, are no longer visible, or they're no longer visible in the position they used to be. You have to look somewhere else to see them because the sky has rolled like a scroll. And the stars that weren't visible before are now visible. Why? Because the sky's been rolled. Now, let me ask you a question. What would make the sky roll like a scroll? Only one thing. A polar axis shift. That's the only thing that can explain the sky looking like a parted scroll that is now being rolled. In other words, what you once saw, you can no longer see, and what you couldn't see, you can now see. Still don't believe it? Look in the last part of verse number... Well, in fact, let me go before I say that. Think about it like this. On a polar axis shift, this polar axis, the north, this North Pole is pointing straight towards the North Star. That means that if I go out to actually see the stars at night, I can actually be able to see all the different constellations. But in order to see these constellations, I have to look for that one star that I know exactly where it is. And what star is that? The North Star. So what I can do is I can take this little star map. Let me just kind of explain how the star map works. It tells you, or it has all the months, and this is the North Star right here in the middle. This is kind of the axis that everything goes on. And I would roll to November the 5th, about 7:35. And then what I would do, because it has north here, is I'm going to turn this north. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the North Star, and I would put that where the North Star is, and I can see all the different constellations. Now, what he's telling me, what John is describing, is that the sky is like a split scroll. And this split scroll all of the sudden rolled. In other words, all of these constellations for thousands of years, I've been able to look up there and say, that's the North Star. And at this time of the year, at this particular time at night, I'm able to see all these constellations. But all of the sudden, because of this occurrence, the sky has done something dramatic. All of the sudden, this thing has rolled on me, and now what I used to see is no longer there. Why? Because the North Star, this is no longer pointing at the North Star. The North Star hasn't moved. The constellations haven't moved. Guess what's taken place? The polar axis has shifted. And as a result of it having shifted, it's just like a scroll, and it's everything that's always been up there, and it's in the same perspective to all of that, and in the same respects to it. It's now just rolled over, but it's not where it's supposed to be. That is what John is describing. So I asked you the question, what would make the sky seem to roll like a scroll? And it is this polar axis shift. That's the only thing that can explain the sky looking like a parted scroll that's being rolled, and all of a sudden, all these constellations that we look up here, all of a sudden, they're over here. And some of the things I used to see, I can't see because it's rolled over. And some of the things we couldn't see is rolled out. Oh my gosh. Now if you still don't believe it, look at the last part of verse number 14. And every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now, the word moved, kineo, can mean to move, or it can mean to remove. But it really doesn't matter. Because either way, it describes the effect of a polar axis shift. When the Earth's axis shifts, most islands are going to be completely wiped away. They're going to be covered by water. And the ones that aren't will seem like they've moved. Why? Because those in the tropics will feel like they're in the Arctic Circle. And those that are in the Arctic Circle will become tropical islands, as if they were moved from one location to another. All of a sudden, these things that were so close, that equator that's so close to there, if this begins to shift, it's going to shift either this way or it's going to shift straight up and down.
I'm not sure to what extent this whole event is going to affect the planet. We've never experienced anything like it before. But scientists are already looking for it. And I don't think they're looking for this to happen soon because of the predictions of the Bible. They just know that from what's happening to the planet, this is expected to happen. I expect this is going to lead to massive earthquakes and huge tidal waves. The term, the four winds of the earth, refers to God's wrath. The 7-year tribulation is divided into two parts. The first 3.5 years is considered the tribulation, but the last 3.5 years is considered the Great Tribulation. The wrath of God intensifies in that second half of the tribulation. Thank you all for watching. May God richly bless you, and I'll catch you next time. Take care. Goodbye for now.